Hey, I'm so glad you are joining me today on the Parable Podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk, and for 2025 here at the Parable Podcast, we are focusing on a new theme each month. And so this is going to give us a focus and an opportunity to be mindful of not only ourselves, but what that looks like for our friends, our family, people that we hold dear. And it's important for me that we dive into our story often and not only see where God has brought us, but is also continuing to allow us to learn and grow in empathy for others, but also just to learn a little bit more about ourselves, to see Him working in our life when maybe we didn't recognize it the first time. So for the month of March, we are going to be talking about growing in our faith. So let's go. Let's jump in. You know, when we talk about growing with our faith, sometimes we may think of challenges, maybe the overarching entirety of our faith journey. Maybe sometimes spiritual abuse comes up. What even is faith? What are our practices, the things that we're doing daily to grow and learn? And maybe sometimes it's even dismantling the things that we've learned that maybe we're not of the Bible, or we really had to have a better understanding, and ultimately making faith our own. So how does faith grow? And where have I seen that in my own life? You know, growing in our faith can kind of be like a Ferris wheel. I love a great analogy. And so in 2023, my son Reed and I were at Life Fest, which is a Christian music festival. I had been going to that Christian music festival since I was like 16 or 17 years old, right when it started, when there was just one stage. And so it has been so fun to take our kids back and just have that time with them, to eat a lot of junk food that's very overpriced, but it has been a lot of fun. You also might remember Reese Malopolsky. He was from the band Brutality, episode 120. That's where we met him at Life Fest. And so there's just a lot of good memories. But one of the things that they've added in the past couple of years is a Ferris wheel, kind of by the grandstand. And that was one of our goals towards the end of this time in the evening. So Reed and I, we got on that Ferris wheel and it was such a blast. Now, the Ferris wheel, I wouldn't say is my most favorite ride. It can kind of get a little sickening after a while. But in this setting, it was a great experience. And so I think sometimes our faith can be like a Ferris wheel. There's so many pieces to it. It's one, just even getting to the ride. I remember there was, once you got your tickets, the line was so long. And so this was during the evening concert events, and there was just one act after another. And so it is the coolest time to go because it's dark now. There's a lot of lights. There's a ton of people. And so we are waiting. And I think that's kind of like our faith sometimes. Either you're just waiting for your faith life to begin, or you have to almost recognize like, oh gosh, like there was really some perfect timing in the way that God played out in my life. And if I think back for myself, I might have mentioned this in a past episode, but for me, I started learning and growing in my faith when I was in 5th grade. I think Jesus has always been a part of my life, but we had moved. I made it a big deal to my mom and dad, like, how dare you? But really, that was the trajectory shift for our family, where not just one of us, but all of us were able to grow in our own faith. And I think that's just so beautiful to think about. If we take this time to think about our faith, sometimes it feels so long, or it feels like, why did this have to happen in a certain way? But when we slow down, we realize, oh, wow, like this had to take place. Miracles had to happen. Things had to be shifted for this specific season, because maybe I wouldn't have accepted it. Maybe wouldn't have the best opportunity. And so when we think about getting on the ride, you know, there is going to be this waiting of, you know, maybe expectation, but also just like an understanding of learning and growing through that. So I would ask yourself the question, you know, when did your faith start? When did this process start taking place, that at least the earliest that you can remember? Because I think that's important to really figure out the foundations of where our faith began. Number two is, once you finally get on this ride, you are helped up to this seat and you're strapped in. My mom likes to make a joke quite often about carnival workers. You can ask her if you know her. But, sometimes I think about the safety of carnival rides. It can be a little rickety. And this was a giant Ferris wheel for something that's just being brought to multiple different places. And so when I stepped on, it's kind of wobbling around. And I just think about sometimes we wonder, like, is faith safe? Is this a place where I can continue to ask for help? Do I have to have it all figured out? And a couple years ago, I did a message about prayer and I thought, oh, well, I have this covered. Like I'm praying all the time. But in reality, I really wasn't. Like there was things that I asked for prayer for, but the majority of the smaller things, the things that I thought that I could take care of, I wanted to do by myself. I didn't ask for prayer for those things. So in this Ferris wheel of faith, we need to be helped up to our seat at times. We need to ask others to pray for us. We need to ask God for help. And it's a constant release of trying to do it alone. Also in a Ferris wheel, there is this constant up and down. Once it starts going, it's round and round and round. But even in the beginning, like we're adding people on. And we're moving and then we're stopping and then we're moving, then we're stopping. I think what I've learned from talking to so many people is that life is up and down. There are good moments. There are bad moments. They're just kind of like moments. And the thing is, we have to remember through it all, our life is centered on Jesus. And so a Ferris wheel is technically a wheel and there's that centerpiece, but Jesus has to be at our center of our faith. And so whether we are going up or down, we can always go back to our center. And I think, I've thought, okay, well, once I understand Jesus or I get to this level of my faith, I'm just going to keep going. The trajectory is going to keep going up. And that really isn't how life is. When we think our life, it can be more like a roller coaster, or it can just be like a huge scribbly line, or maybe it's like steps, but then they're going back down again. We need to keep seeking His voice. And our faith is going to be challenged through experiences and questions. And we are going to need to discern, how do we center our lives back on Jesus? Another way that our faith is like a Ferris wheel is that we are going to support others. So while Reed and I were having a blast and going around, there was these 2 or 3 little kids in the seat behind us. Sometimes they're front, sometimes they're behind. But I think they were just like freaking out after a while. Even though their parents were right at the bottom, they just got a little scared. And so we turned around and we were trying to encourage them as best as possible. I don't think they got it, but I think that's so true, is that, sometimes in our faith, we have to extend our faith to others when maybe they need it the most, where they're questioning, they're trying to figure things out, they're scared. And so sometimes our faith can be a direct impact to somebody else's life, and vice versa. I'm sure you can think about another time where you're just like, I can't even have the words to pray right now. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to think. But somebody interceded for you. They were there and they were loving you through the way and supporting you in this process. And so that's the beautiful thing about faith, is that this is not just a solitary journey. It is a community effort. It is loving our brothers and sisters well, and vice versa. Another thing about having faith like a Ferris wheel is enjoying the ride. I think I'm a joyful person, but sometimes my brain gets caught up with thinking, okay, now this is what we're going to do next, and this band is on at this time. And I just remember, I was just enjoying this moment and looking at my son, and we were having a great time. There was, I think Matthew West was on stage at that time. So it was just a beautiful celebration. There was music and it was night, and it was just fun. It was just straight fun. And I was just so blessed to be thinking about, like, in that same moment, like 25 years ago, like I was 16 and sitting on that ground, just like trying to figure out Jesus. And yeah, I think when we get to enjoy the ride of our faith, God is going to show us just like his goodness and his mercy and his love and all the things that he has just bestowed upon us. And so I was just grateful for my son, having that one-on-one experience with him, and just thankful. Okay, it always helps to have one crying moment in every podcast. And then finally is just like coming back to childhood. And I know that's in continuation with joy, but I think sometimes in our faith, we think, okay, well, have I missed the time? Have I missed the age that I'm supposed to accomplish this? And I think we can go back to that verse where Jesus says we have to have faith like a child. And in that moment, the disciples are trying to figure out like who gets into heaven and who's going to be there first. And Jesus is just like, hey, I need you to relax a bit. And I need you to be like this child and think about how a kid responds to us in the world. Like there's just this willingness, like, yes, mom. Oh yeah. Or like, no, or questioning like, why do we do this? Why do we do that? And there's this sense of curiosity. So having faith like a Ferris wheel, it is coming back to our childlike faith in moments when it feels really hard. I'm so proud of our daughter. Recently, they had started a fellowship of Christian athletes at their school, and she invited her friend, who isn't even an athlete, but anyone can come. And she's really enjoyed it. And her friend has been super interested in learning about faith and understanding. And just the other day, we had her over because she wanted to do a Bible study. I'm like, what is even happening? I mean, I was just so proud of her, my daughter, but I was proud of this friend because she was just so honest and willing to ask questions and like, why do we do this? Or why do we do that? And it was just such a blessing to have that experience. And I think that it reminded for myself, sometimes, you get caught up in, okay, I have to do this today, or this is how I have to read my Bible, but really just opening ourselves up to the idea of how can I have a childlike faith today? And in those moments of joy and wonder and curiosity, how are we then able to just go into the world with this newfound faith, these new mercies that are happening every single day so that we can love the people around us well, that we can understand God in a new and a better way because he's allowed us to walk in that childlike faith. So here's the things over again of just sometimes faith is just about getting on the ride. Okay. It's going to take some waiting sometimes. Sometimes we have to be asked for help. Sometimes we are going to get strapped in and we're going to need to ask for help. We wonder if it's safe. Sometimes it's this constant up and down of our faith and we kind of wonder where we're going, but we have to be centered on Jesus. And sometimes it's about supporting others because it's going to happen to us at some point in our life and we're going to reach out and need that helping hand too. Sometimes our faith is just about enjoying the ride and having the joy of God in our life and just being present with him and just loving the experience and not worrying about the other senseless things that we don't need to worry about in that moment because we are honoring him. We are giving our life over to him. And maybe for you today, it's just about coming back to that childhood faith, that moment where we just need to let go a little bit and we just need to ask the questions and be curious and lean into that joy a little bit more. So our faith can be like a Ferris wheel as we grow. And I'd love to read over this prayer that Paul wrote at the beginning of Colossians. And I thought that it just really sums up just this feeling of going forward and growing in our faith as we head into the month of March. This is Colossians 1:9-14, and this is the Voice translation. Father, may they clearly know your will and achieve the height and depth of spiritual wisdom and understanding. May their lives be a credit to you, Lord. And what's more, may they continue to delight you by doing every good work and growing in the true knowledge that comes from being close to you. Strengthen them with your infinite power according to your glorious might, so that they will have everything they need to hold on and endure hardship patiently and joyfully. Thank you, Father, as you have made us eligible to receive our portion of the inheritance given to all of those set apart by the light. You have rescued us from dark powers and brought us safely into the kingdom of your Son, whom you love and in whom we are redeemed and forgiven of our sins. Hey, if this theme of growing in your faith really made an impact on you, could you do me a favor? Would you consider subscribing to the Parable Podcast? If you are, thank you so much. I really appreciate that wherever you listen. Or maybe it's just even writing a review, or if you listen on Spotify, it's simply just pressing the star button. It's awesome. So wherever you listen, we greatly appreciate that. Just helps other people find out about the Parable Podcast. Or better yet, if you know somebody that could be encouraged by this Ferris wheel themed day, I would love to know that somebody could be encouraged by a Ferris wheel, but truly it is this gift of faith. So pass this episode along. And also I have a playlist that goes along with it, just highlighting some of these faith journey episodes. So here are 2 questions as we round out this episode today. Number 1, how did your own faith start out? And if you don't know, or if you don't really remember, just maybe have some time in prayer where you can just kind of figure these things out. And maybe God can reveal just, a memory or something that was happening that can be really special for you. Number 2, where is God reminding me about circumstances or things people have said, a moment that had allowed him to grow where you are today? And that can be a whole bunch of things. I didn't even think about this Ferris wheel thing until I started writing this, and that just brought me such joy. We hope you were encouraged to think about your own parable story. To connect with me, simply visit DanielleZapchenk.com for details. Remember, your parable showcases how God is always a part of our faith journey. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.